One almost feels sorry for the Democrats.
Political historian Lee Edwards at the Heritage Foundation says last Tuesday's Republican victories just add to the GOP gains from the 2010 Tea Party revolution and 2014's election night,
which was a GOP tsunami. And yet, this White House and Democrats are trying to put on a happy face and say, well, you know, this is terrific. You know, we're going to look forward to what's going to happen in 2016.
Fact of the matter is, President Obama will leave his party in much worse shape than he found it. The numbers show it in stark detail.
When President Obama took office in 2009, Democrats controlled the White House and both chambers in Congress, with Nancy Pelosi as House Speaker and Harry Reid running the Senate. More than half the state's governors were Democrats, and in state legislatures, Democrats had full control in 27 states. Today, after nearly 7 years of Obama as president, Democrats have lost 13 U.S. Senate seats and 69 in the House, 12 state governors, and a whopping 910 seats in state legislatures. And now the GOP controls both the governor's mansion and both houses of the legislature in 24 states.
This president who said, I'm going to be a transformational president. Well, it seems to me what he has done is to transfer the Democratic Party into a minority party. And that isn't the transformation the Democrats wanted.
As a student of political history, Edwards has studied U.S. presidents in depth. He says of Obama,
he's the most self-absorbed president that we've had in modern times, maybe in American history. He believes in himself so deeply that he does not listen to and look at the returns at the ballot box. Well, I'm sure Democrats from the House and the Senate are saying to him, look, can't we maybe take a second look at these issues?
But White House spokesman Josh Earnest's comments after last week's latest round of Democratic losses shows that the administration isn't backing down on its liberal positions.
There have been other Democrats that have sought to run on this agenda, and they've been served well by making that decision.
But that agenda, including issues like Obamacare and gun control, failed to help Democrats in key elections last week, where Republicans kept control of the state Senate in Virginia and took the governor's mansion in Kentucky for only the second time in 4 decades. But Obama has stuck with his policies, no matter how much they've hurt his own party. And Edwards says there's a reason for that, the president's utter faith that he's right.
He's stuck in believing himself to be the most brilliant president, maybe since Thomas Jefferson.
Like all presidents, Barack Obama wanted a strong, positive, historical legacy. But the reality is a major part of his legacy will be his own party, decimated by years of historic election losses, both here in Washington and across the country. Paul Strand, CBN News, Capitol Hill.
But we've asked ourselves, and I've asked him, he's not completely stupid. So what is behind it? I mean, you can't see these incredible losses and his party just decimated. You can't see that without saying, I've done something wrong. But has he? He keeps saying, I'm the greatest president since George Washington. I mean, he is so full of himself, it's unbelievable. But is he accomplishing something behind the scenes that we don't know about? Well, with us now from Washington to talk about what President Obama is doing in the White House and how it's affecting America is Daniel Mitchell. He's a senior fellow with the Cato Institute, and I welcome you, Dan, to this edition of the 700 Club. Hey, what's the game plan? Tell us about it.
Well, let me give you some discouraging news. If you're Barack Obama, maybe you're willing to accept some short-term defeats for your political party if in exchange, with things like Obamacare, you're creating more long-run dependency on government in the American population. Maybe if you're Obama, you're willing to sacrifice some short-term political gains in order to expand the power of the bureaucracy to erode the rule of law and replace congressional legislation with just bureaucratic edicts and rules. So I'm a little bit worried that we have to actually figure out how to change these policies and curtail the power of government. Otherwise, Obama may actually be the one with the last laugh because he will have changed the culture and nature of America.
Well, let's just take the EPA, for example, carbon rules and so forth. He's attacked the coal industry, and he wants to change the way we produce things. He's into this green revolution stuff. How lasting is that? I mean, say there's another Congress that comes in with another president. Can they overturn that? Can they fire these people?
In theory, if there's a new president who has a better sense of what's good policy for the economy, but more importantly, also has a sense of proper limits on the executive power of the White House, that new president can tell the EPA, all right, we want to undo these policies because Congress never voted on them. You're, in effect, making up law instead of enforcing law. So, yes, in theory, a new White House can begin to unwind some of this damage. But I'm worried that because they're facing such a hostile establishment press, a lot of Republicans will be nervous about undoing some of this damage. So Obama will have expanded the power of government. He will have eroded the rule of law. And then if Republicans take over in 2017, well, maybe they'll cut back only 10% or 20% of what Obama did. So we'll still be in a worse position than when we started.
Well, I'm thinking that, for example, the National Labor Relations Board, he's stacked that pretty much in favor of labor, and suddenly they're bringing out rules that are just very draconian in terms of business. So what do you do with them? They got fixed terms, or is there no way that the Congress can change that? Again,
a new president with the sort of the appointment power, and as these different seats come open on these independent agencies and of course appointments in the bureaucracy, a new president, if that new president is willing to be very tough and to withstand the criticism that you'll get from an establishment press that is very much pro-statism, then yes, you can make some of these changes. But here's my concern. The whole history of the post-World War II era is a ratchet effect, with government getting bigger, then maybe we claw it back a little bit, but then it gets bigger again, then we claw it back a little bit, and then it gets bigger again. So the long-run trend is bad, and this is what concerns me about Obama. He's made a decision that he's trying to make government bigger. He's a true believer, ideologue, and in the sense of big government is wonderful in his mind. And he's willing to suffer these short-run political losses to get what he wants in the long run. And unless Republicans, if they get in power, unless they're willing to be equally tough in terms of keeping their eye on the prize, which is theoretically, if you're a Republican, smaller government, then Obama, as I said before, he may win in the long run, even though his party has lost in the short run.
Well, you know, the media in Washington, let's face it, it lives on government. The Washington Post has circulation. The more bureaucrats they are buying the Post, the more circulation they have. In terms of the talking heads on the various networks, if they're the Washington bureau chief, the bigger Washington is, the more important it is, the more airtime they get, so they want it bigger. And the bureaucrats want it bigger, and the real estate people in Washington want more bureaucrats, so there's kind of a inbred mafia, whatever you want to use the term, that causes this bigness to stay there.
Washington is a company town, and the company is big government. And here's the thing that really discourages me. The richest metropolitan region in the United States is now the greater Washington area, because you have so many overpaid bureaucrats, so many fat cat lobbyists, so much money sloshing around that's being taken from hardworking Americans in the real economy. It's being transferred to Washington, and it's just like it's like a bunch of pigs in a pigsty rolling in mud. They're having a great time. They're living the life of Riley. They're on Easy Street because government has gotten so big, and it's really tragic when you think about the fact that a lot of companies now think their best way to make money is by getting in bed with politicians and doing corrupt deals like the Export-Import Bank, or looking for subsidies or handouts. That's cronyism. That's not capitalism. And so I worry we're becoming more like France and Greece, and that's not going to be good for the American people.
Right. You've had guys stand up and say, all right, when I get to be president, I'm going to do away with the Department of Energy. I'm going to do away with whatever civil service. They go down the list of course, the man from Texas forgot which ones he was going to cut out, and that kind of ruined his chances. But nevertheless, they have all these targets, the education department, et cetera. Could they do that, do you think? Has anybody really got the political clout to do away with an entire department?
You've asked the key question, Pat. Republicans had control of both ends of Pennsylvania Avenue from 2001 to 2006, and yet they made government bigger. And so if there's a new Republican coming into office in January 20th, 2017, will they be more like Ronald Reagan, or will they be more like some of the other Republican presidents who've maybe given some good rhetoric in campaign season, but once they're actually in power, they wind up sort of getting too comfortable with the big government crowd in Washington. They have this sort of go along to get along attitude, and maybe that's easier in the short run. But if you care about America in the long run, we desperately need to figure out some way of shrinking the burden of government, restoring the federal government to its proper bounds, sort of outlined in the Constitution. And that's difficult because you're going to run into a buzzsaw of opposition from the Washington culture, from the establishment press, and all the other people who benefit from America moving in the wrong direction.
Last question. You're with the Cato Institute. Cato's libertarian. Are you all going to stand against this, or have you stood against it? Will you come out forcefully against this big government encroachment?
One thing I can say with great confidence is that the Cato Institute has an unblemished record of principled opposition to big government. We fight big government even when Republicans are in charge, because we don't care whether you have an R after your name or a D after your name. If you're expanding regulation, if you're making the tax code more complicated and onerous, if you're bloating the bureaucracy and spending too much money, we oppose that because we definitely believe in the principles outlined by our founding fathers in the Constitution of a very limited central government with very few powers constrained by the rule of law. And unfortunately, the entire 21st century, even under Bush, but especially under Obama, we've seen policy move in the wrong direction. And so I can say with complete confidence that the Cato Institute will be fighting big government no matter who's in power in 2017.
All right.
And hopefully we'll actually be helping someone shrink government.
One last question. Give me the odds. I mean, if you're a betting man, 5 to 1, 10 to 1, even odds, what would you think about that vision actually ever coming to pass, assuming the Republicans win the White House in this next election?
Here's a reason for confidence. For 5 years in a row, the House of Representatives has passed the Ryan budget that contains some very necessary entitlement reforms to save America from becoming France or Greece. And the Senate, just this past year, passed a similar budget. So as much as I sometimes criticize these guys in Washington, I think some of them are looking at the long-run data. They see the threat to the United States of a bloated federal government, and they're willing, especially if they have someone in the White House who's willing to go along with them, I think they might be willing to do the right thing for the right reason. And a lot of what we're doing at the Cato Institute is trying to create an intellectual climate, an environment in which the politicians will suddenly realize, hey, this is our perhaps once-in-a-lifetime chance to do some of the things that are necessary to restore the vision of the founding fathers of a limited central government. So fingers crossed, Pat. I think we actually have a chance of doing these things.